It was a tale of two hearings into Attorney General William Barr's handling of the Mueller report, one conducted by Republicans in the Senate Judiciary Committee into, you guessed it, the now defunct Hillary Clinton investigation.
We know that the person in charge of investigating hated Trump's guts. These are the people that made a decision that Clinton didn't do anything wrong, and a counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign was warranted.
And the other conducted by the Democrats into what and how the Attorney General told the public about the Special Counsel's findings.
In your March letter to Congress, you concluded, and I quote, that the evidence is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense, end quote. However, Special Counsel Mueller methodically outlines 10 episodes, some continuing multiple actions by the president to mislead the American people and interfere with the investigations.
But the most important person expressing concern? Robert Mueller himself. Last night, reports surfaced that Mueller sent a letter in March to Barr telling him the AG's 4-page summary, quote, did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of his work and conclusions. Continuing, there is now public confusion about critical aspects of the results of our investigation. He also urged him to release longer Mueller-provided summaries right away, which Barr did not do. The AG spent much of this morning defending himself.
He was very clear with me that he was not suggesting that we had misrepresented his report. We used the language from the report to state those bottom line conclusions.
But many Democrats on the committee weren't buying his answers, and one of them, Senator Mazie Hirono, took it one step further.
Being Attorney General of the United States is a sacred trust. You have betrayed that trust. America deserves better. You should resign.
Joining me now are attorney Michael Zeldin, former special assistant to Robert Mueller, legal analyst for CNN, resident fellow at the Institute of Politics at the Harvard Kennedy School. Michael, it's good to see you. Along with two former U.S. attorneys, Carmen Ortiz, who served under Barack Obama, successfully prosecuted Jahar Tsarnaev and James Whitey Bulger, among others. She's now with Anderson and Krieger, LLP. Good to see you, Carmen.
Likewise,
Michael Sullivan, appointed by George W. Bush. He successfully prosecuted the shoe bomber, among others. Worked with Robert Mueller at the DOJ, is now a partner with the Ashcroft Group. Those were so long, I got to say thanks for coming, and we got to go. Can I start with you for a minute? What do you make of this Mueller? What's your interpretation of what Mueller said in that March 27th letter to
I'm troubled
the
by
AG?
it. I think he's further politicized the process.
You're troubled with Mueller having done it?
Yes, absolutely, because he knew that that letter was going to be leaked to the public.
So what was your take on this thing last night? You heard Barr seemed to be saying it really wasn't a criticism of what I did. It was a criticism of the press's interpretation of what I did. What was your takeaway from it, Carmen?
I think that was not an accurate take. I think Bob Mueller and his team were probably very disturbed by the spin that the Attorney General had given to the Mueller report before releasing it to the public. And so he wanted to get the record straight, and he advised them that because the summary that Barr had issued was not accurate and true to what the report said, here are these executive summaries. Release them now before there's further confusion, and he failed to do so.
You want to break the tie, Michael?
Well, so the first thing is DOJ released Mueller's letter, so it wasn't a leak per se. Barr testified that it was a release of the letter. Second, Barr testified that there was a disagreement between himself and Mueller about what the evidence was. Mueller thought that, as the regulations specify, that the executive summaries, the report itself, should be released and not Barr's encapsulation of it into 4 pages. So, I mean, I think everyone is a little bit right here, and we have a very political process as a consequence.
You know, one of the things that was most troubling to me, and I'm sure you've all seen this today, I had totally forgotten about it, is on April 10th, which I guess was 14 days after the letter was sent from Mueller to Barr, Attorney General Barr was in front of a House committee. Charlie Crist, former governor of Florida, now a congressperson, asked him the following question, and here's the Attorney General's answer.
Reports have emerged recently, General, that members of the Special Counsel's team are frustrated at some level with the limited information included in your March 24th letter, that it does not adequately or accurately necessarily portray the report's findings. Do you know what they're referencing with that?
No, I don't.
You know, when I heard that this morning, Michael, I say to myself immediately, and I try to be a little bit more measured, he perjured himself. But then I heard Barr say today, no, that wasn't in response to Patrick Leahy. No, they were asking me about members of Mueller's team, and they were unidentified people. I was answering that. They didn't ask me about Mueller. Does that pass the laugh test?
It passes the perjury test. It's not it's not a prosecutable crime. What he said was, I don't know who the they is, and I don't know what you're referring to, but I can expect that this is what they were talking. So the clip stops him off and says, I don't know. But then he says, but let me offer my best guess. So it's not a perjury case. It may have been a little bit misleading. He could have said, well, we did receive this letter on March 28th where Mueller said this, and let me go on to explain.
But he answered the question. You know, one of the things that Barr said today, Carmen, that I found to be pretty compelling is if Bob Mueller was so upset about I'm paraphrasing what he said.
Sure.
If Bob Mueller was so upset about what I was doing, when I offered him the opportunity, and I assume this is true until Mueller says otherwise, to look at the 4-page summary that he subsequently criticized, he said no. And the point being, if he had a problem, he could have told me he had a problem. He chose not to take that opportunity. Isn't that legitimate criticism of Mueller on Barr's behalf?
I don't think it's legitimate because I think that what Bob Mueller was trying to do was not really try to summarize and give it a separate type of tone or spin. Why was there a need for a letter in the first place? He could have issued those executive summaries or portions of them.
He could have, but he chose, Barr chose to do the summary, and if he chose to do the summary and he offers an opportunity to the guy who wrote the underlying report to read his summary, and I assume criticize it if he chooses, isn't it on Mueller for having said, no, I'm not interested?
I don't think that, I mean, perhaps he can say, you know, those aren't my words and he wasn't involved in it, but quite frankly, I don't think so because there were accurate reports or portions of that report that could have been released without confusion.
Why didn't Mueller take that opportunity?
Because he didn't want to have any ownership in it at all. I think
he worked for 2 years and they didn't want any ownership?
He didn't want ownership in the 4 pages, which I find troubling.
Why would he? It doesn't make sense. Why would he not?
It doesn't make any sense except for the fact that he could be critical of it later on if he didn't like what was in there. And I find that extremely troubling getting back to this whole issue. The process is so politicized. Bob Mueller obviously has a position as relates to the president, but he wasn't clear about his position in his own report.
What do you mean he has a position?
Well, I'm reading it. He believes that the president committed obstruction, but he's not going as far enough to say that.
Because the Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel memo says you can't indict a sitting president, which is why it seems to me and I actually read the whole thing, unlike Lindsey Graham, the chair of the committee, who opens by saying, I haven't finished reading it yet, which I found to be totally incredible. He basically said, Congress, it's your job. Isn't that what he said?
He did. Well, but why did he even have to say, Congress, it's your job? Congress knows what its job is, and that's why I find it troubling. It's become more about the special counsel in terms of the purpose of the special counsel's role. He's the equivalent of a United States attorney, and he's politicized the process unfairly.
You know, you took the two, and I don't think you don't have worked with Mueller, have you?
I know Bob.
Okay, so all three of you do. Can you explain to me? I understand he's a traditional kind of guy. He writes a letter the one time he spoke directly to the public when BuzzFeed put out their report saying, when BuzzFeed said that Mueller has concluded that the president directed Michael Cohen to lie to Congress, he said, quote, it's not accurate. But he didn't explain what wasn't accurate. Then he writes this letter to Barr. We're all confused about what he's upset about. Why doesn't Mueller hold a press conference, offer to testify tomorrow, do something if he's so concerned about that we understand appropriately what his work was? I don't get it.
It's not what his job is. His job is not to speak to the press. His job is to investigate underlying criminal allegations.
But he just told the Attorney General that you misrepresented me, and if he's being misrepresented, then why doesn't he speak for himself?
He did speak for himself
in the report.
To the Attorney General and in the report. Remember, Bob Mueller is operating under regulations that very much handcuff what he can do. When I was an independent counsel, when Ken Starr was an independent counsel, we had a duty to file a public report.
That was the old law.
In response to that, we have a new law. All it allows Mueller to do is talk to the Attorney General. That is what he's doing. He wrote 2 letters to the Attorney General. We've only seen one.
Yeah.
He spoke to the Attorney General.
15 minutes.
He said, don't do this. Just release my summary. You're the AG.
But that's his boss in this thing, and
no,
his boss decided to do otherwise.
See, let me just say where I disagree with that.
Quickly, if you can.
he is the special counsel appointed because the Justice Department has been excluded from this investigation. He is not working for the Attorney General. And the Attorney General, I think, misstates that when he says
Can I raise one more really important issue? This whole obstruction of justice thing, and what did Mueller conclude? What did he not conclude? The Barr. When Mueller is asked the question, when Barr is asked the question today, Michael, about the whole notion of Donald Trump directing Don McGahn, his White House counsel, to dispute the New York Times account that he had told him to get Mueller fired, to have Mueller fired. Barr's response to me was so tortured when he was asked the question today. His answer is, well, it could have been a press strategy rather than an obstruction strategy. When you were the U.S. Attorney, would you have bought that if somebody said that to you when you're deciding whether to charge somebody?
I doubt very much I'd bring charges of obstruction based on a governor instructing its chief legal counsel or its chief of staff to essentially direct the communication to a media to put some type of spin on it. I don't think it rises to obstruction. My point is this: Bob Mueller had 2 years, unlimited resources, and he could not conclude that the president committed obstruction, but he says, I'm not going to exonerate you. It's unheard of.
Well,
that
except that there's that memo that you're choosing to ignore that seemed to have been controlling with him. We only have a couple of seconds left. What's your reaction to his defense of concluding that there was an obstruction of justice?
I think he was looking at the elements and whether or not there was obstruction beyond a reasonable doubt. And perhaps they find, as he says, there was no obstruction, not for lack of trying, but because he failed basically to accomplish. Those that he was directing refused to abide by his directives.
We only have 15 seconds, Michael.
Mueller said, the OLC opinion prohibits me from doing this.
Legal counsel, yeah.
Fairness, because the president doesn't have a chance to defend himself if I say he committed a crime, but I can't charge him. And preemption. Congress's job is now to look at this. If I said he committed a crime, that makes them have to look at it, and he doesn't want to do that. So he gave 3 reasons.
We got to leave it there for now. Michael, nice to see you.
Good to see you, Jim.
Carmen, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And the other Michael, thank you so much. Appreciate it.